Welcome back. Another episode back in the studio with my good friend Catie over
Back
here.
in the hill country of Texas.
I'm
Welcome
so
home,
excited to
Whitney.
be back. And we have so many cool topics to unpack, but today we are talking about company benefits. So
You may be the only person in the world that would ever put cool and company benefits in the same sentence, but I'd love to see where you want to take this one.
we're going to unpack it, but here's the headline. Are company benefits a retention tool or just a PR move?
Ooh.
And here's my thought on it is it's like many things. It's a spectrum. And so we're going to talk about companies that are doing it well, companies that are doing it okay, companies that are doing it horribly, and then maybe go down a few rabbit holes on some of them.
Okay for that?
Yeah? Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So as I was thinking about, some of the companies that we've worked with and just some of the well-known companies, so we'll share some of those because they're better known.
Right.
I think about Patagonia is one that stands out. Let's just jump into some of the companies that we know are doing it well and why they are doing it well. Now, I think that they understand their employees really well and what draws them, and it is really values-based. But what stood out to me about some of their company benefits is that they offer 16 weeks parental leave, which I know if you're listening in other countries, that is not a lot, but for America,
It is
a
game changer.
It's huge. And how the stat that stood out to me from what they're doing is 100% of their parents that return after having a child or from parental leave come back. 100% compared to the U.S. average at 57%. That was maybe listeners, you've heard this, but that was staggering to me.
Well, it is staggering when you look at it on paper like that. But if you've ever lived in an organization where they have tens of thousands of employees and you can start to look at the data of people who exercise that benefit in particular, parental leave, whether it is, the mom, the dad, whoever, when they exercise that, there's a drop off. There's like a cliff that happens at some point. And so, a big piece of that is trying to figure out how do I integrate this new little person into my family. Some parental leave too. It's not just little person, right? It's, you're fostering a new child, you're adopting a new child. There's a lot of things at play, and most companies see the drop off. And so how Patagonia has been able to fix it, I can't believe it's just 100% the parental leave, but I know in my experience that would have taken off like so much stress when I had both of my children if I didn't have to sit there and think about, okay, you only have this many days or this many weeks, and I hope everything goes okay. And really knitting together the salary and the pay and everything on the back end was the last thing I needed to be doing when I was on parental leave. And I hats off to them. That is a model that seems to be, in my opinion, that should be table stakes.
It should be. And unfortunately, we're still battling a lot of that. Parents, moms, dads alike, really foster parents, adoptive parents, biological parents. Everyone's struggling with that, I think. And unfortunately, you have a lot of other countries leading the way in that. And I think companies that are doing it well also then, at least from what I see, the companies that put a stake in the ground on that are also doing it well in other areas, because what they know and what they believe, I think, is that when we put our people first, when we work off of values versus profit, we can have both. Because now let's use Patagonia as the example. 100% of parents come back after leave. Again, crazy that that's happening. And they're not having to spend time or money rehiring those people. That's costly. That's not to mention the morale and everything that comes with it. So not only are they creating an environment that is healthy for their employees, they're also investing in their profits. But that's not always front and center. But that's, I think, what we want our listeners to hear, is that just because you can't see it directly correlated doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact on your profits.
I think a lot of companies spend too much time looking at it's got to be causation versus correlation when we're looking at things like this. They're like, well, is it really because we gave them 16 weeks I don't know, are you doing surveys? Are you asking people? Or are you trying to assess people when they're coming back into the workplace after they've, added a new or family member or several family members in some
Right.
cases? If they're not like searching for the data there, it's going to be really hard to justify. But I think most companies think about these employer or employee decisions very short term. They think about like what's right in front of them as opposed to the long term. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to have stability on our team? Are we trying to make this a family friendly workplace? Like, what is the actual goal? And I don't think most companies really spend the time thinking about that. So it's really easy just to say, well, if all we have to minimally require is 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and we don't have to require it for, certain people in the parental equation, if you will, then that's what they'll do. And it's just
Yeah.
easier that way.
Yeah. I think parental leave is a big one we could probably talk for a whole episode about.
100%.
But there's a few others that have been standing out that aren't your, I guess I would say, traditional benefits, your old school benefits, right? Like mental health support. And I think that that is such a big one as an additional benefit that is outside of your healthcare, because that's a whole nother thing we could unpack. Healthcare is tricky. And whether or not you have great healthcare, mediocre healthcare, whatever that looks like from your company in terms of that benefits, having mental health support on top of that, whether that looks like flex days or actual additional access to mental health services, that's a huge one that actually Gen Z is kind of leading the way in saying, if that's not supportive and if that isn't a part of the benefit package, I'm not participating.
So let's make the caveat though.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about people, employees who are, or people who are looking for a job and they're trying to decide, should I go and work at this company or not? When you have the luxury of choice, that's what we're talking
Sure,
about.
100%.
Not everybody has the luxury of choice. And a lot of times you choose a job because you're trying to feed your family, because it's you've been out of work. I mean, we are in unprecedented times, really, with so much unemployment, rolling layoffs, it just feels like, in every industry and sector. And so I think we need to, as we go forward and have this conversation, we need to make the distinction about, is this when the employee really gets a choice of saying, I want to work here or not, or when they're just like saying, golly, I hope they have really great health insurance? Because most people, I think nowadays, are just looking at, do they have health insurance? Do we get dental? Do I have, pick one or two others that are really meaningful to you? Great, I'll go there.
Right. And yes. Yes, we should. This is definitely an out of choice conversation. And as you said, a lot of people today aren't operating from that position. So if you are not able to operate from that position, which a lot of people are right now, what are some things that you can do? So you can't say, oh, I'm not gonna come here unless you offer this benefit. That's not really realistic.
Not usually.
However, what I have seen very successfully, shout out to, this person might know who I'm talking about here, and Megan. I'll just say Megan. That's fine. Megan.
Hey, girl.
Hey, I know you listen. So she actually put together a case at her company just to extend the parental leave for working mothers.
Nice.
And it was passed through at a very large corporate company. And that was successful because of her work around it. And so
Fortune 500, let's be clear.
Yeah.
This wasn't like a 20-person organization. Fortune 500 company that has benefits to, I mean,
and it wasn't her alone. She brought together a group, a coalition of people that really pushed to make this happen. And this was a big deal in this company. And so it is possible, and you can be a part of that change. So I share that story to say, if it's not where you want it to be, how can you have influence over it if everything else is adding up for you? Or like you said, you just need to take the job.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have some influence and kind of lead the way for others just because you didn't have it. And we hear this a lot, right? Well, I didn't have it when I was, going up in my career. You can also pave the way for others and making it better for them.
Okay. So we're going to hit that later. I want to start off though by just let's bring the employer into the conversation. Yeah. So on average, companies spend about $30 an hour per employee on benefits. So you go, well, how's that possible? Because some people make minimum wage, and that's like significantly less than $30 an hour. So it's averaged across all the different salary groups in the company. And most large companies do have tiers of benefits that they offer people. So if you're, an intern, entry level, mid level, supervisory, people leader, manager, whatever you want to call it, director, executive, there's a lot of companies that really do segment their benefits. And that makes a lot of sense because there's usually differing levels of responsibility. But employers have to be really smart about what they offer. One is they have to, in many states, offer particular benefits because that's what is required. So that's great for a lot of employees. Foundational benefits. So health, dental, that sort of thing. If they are able to offer a 401k or retirement plan, that sort of thing. But the rest of it is really a choose your own adventure, which I think is a benefit to people who work in HR or people services, whatever it's called in your organization, because that's where they get to attain a more competitive advantage and really be sort of on the leading edge of understanding what do people want. But they don't have a ton of money also to spend. They have to be really smart about understanding what their employees would want, what would be meaningful, and what's competitive in their market. So with that, I would love to know some of the places where either you've worked or we've worked or places where we've consulted or coached. What are some of the benefits that you've seen that are just like top tier? It'd be great if every company could offer them to their people.
Yes, great question. And those are, I would call those perks, right? Yes, they're benefits, but they're kind of that added perks, sometimes even called like retention or loyalty or some language around that where you're rewarded at certain different levels of years of work.
Right.
So, 30 years ago, you might get a little plaque for being there for 20 years, when today you might get a bonus or a certain stipend, which I think is a huge differentiator for organizations that could do it. So to answer your question, some of the things that I've seen have been things like pet insurance or bring your dog to work day or things around pets, which is great for people that aren't tapping into parental leave or
even if they are.
Or if they are, they also have pets. And that's a huge help, right? So things like that. I still think that the flexible work, although it should be foundational in my opinion, is an added perk where you could say things like, for example, you've reached 5 years of service at this organization, you get a 3-month sabbatical. I see more than previous organizations doing this, and it's a huge bonus. Now, that's often when you're at an organization for 5-10 years, like you've put in some time, but that's huge. And it's often a month. I don't really see 3 months, but share with us what you're seeing. I'd love to
One
hear
of the
it.
ones when I worked at the Partnership for Public Service, one of the benefits they offered, which I thought was revolutionary because it's a nonprofit organization, was that after 10 years of service, they would give you a month's paid sabbatical. So for all of us, we were compensated appropriately, but we were compensated appropriately as nonprofit employees. And even in Washington, D.C., okay? So let me just put the caveat there. But there were a lot of people who weren't gunning for, I'm going to stay for a decade so I could get that. But it was something that I think gave everybody who worked there an aspirational sort of footnote or earmark or something like that. Like it was a milestone that you said, look, if you really put in your time, you're going to have this. And when you went, this is the best part, when you would take your 1 month sabbatical, it was anywhere you wanted to go. So some people would go to like Spain or go to Europe for a month and do whatever there. There were people who just stayed at home because they wanted to have a whole month in the summer, for example, with their children and to get around to projects that they've just been languishing on that they never got to do. But if you have 4 weeks and you're being paid and you aren't supposed to answer emails, like we would go off grid with those folks, it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But and everybody celebrated it. They made sure that you could take your sabbatical. It wasn't just like, but like check your email and make sure nothing is on fire. You were gone, and everyone was really proud to make sure that you could take that time.
I think that's so important. And in the vein of continuing to treat our employees like humans, I think both of us have experienced some great perks and some on the flip side at places that we've worked together and have consulted for. So things like you get a certain days where they're just for you throughout the year. And with that came a stipend to be able to spend on wellness or actual wellness stipends monthly for gym memberships or things like that. Those are added things that I think really matter to people. On the flip side, what happens when you have some of those perks that are based on years, but then they're pulled off? So you said like there weren't people gunning for the 10 years for that. Well, I know that I've seen companies where you have, okay, you get your car paid, you get a car payment.
Okay, you need to explain this one. Tell us about the car payment benefit.
Okay. So at this organization at year 7, so I had been there 4 years. So I'm like, oh, in 3 years, I get a car stipend. And it wasn't insignificant. It was $500, a car stipend. A month, just cash for your car. So at the time, I had a car that was like, could be used to, could use an upgrade. But I was like, oh, well, I have the car stipend coming up in 3 years. Like, I'm going to ride it out for a little bit, and then I'm going to use an old car, and I'm going to wait it out. So I did that. I should have not. I know this. Like, you're not supposed to put all your eggs in one basket like that. And it was not a big deal, right? But at the same time, I get to that year. So in September is my 7th year. This is the beginning of the year. And they say, oh, we're not doing that anymore. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Okay, so what's the new thing? Like, is there going to be $500 for something else? Oh, no. No, it's just, we're not doing that anymore. Okay, great. So, and I get it. Like, perks can change, but at the same time, like, this was not a Fortune 500 company. This was not a multi-thousand person organization. This was a small company. And so that mattered. Same thing happened for someone else. There's a huge milestone that you're supposed to get a huge bonus for. This person met it. The company wasn't doing well, didn't get that cash. That's a huge disappointment for someone that is maybe not counting on it, but knows about it. And that trust is eroded pretty quickly.
And it's not, these benefits are never why people join a company.
No.
They're usually joining because they, it's like, oh, this is the next role in accounting that I want to have, or this is the next
and
sales job I want to have. And they weren't
there at the start when I joined. Right. They became important.
Right. Because that keeps you bought in to say, okay, yeah, you know what? It is worth sticking around for because they're going to reward my tenure. They're going to reward my longevity. They're going to reward me being here and being loyal to the mission, the cause, whatever it is that we're trying to do. And this bait and switch that companies do, and they kind of act like it's no big deal when in reality, there were a lot of people who were sitting there banking on it.
Right. And I think like any other change that's rolled out or any announcement, I think what really matters is the why behind it. So why was this change enacted? What is being replaced by it? And do we still care about our employees in that way? Because at least how that was felt in that moment was it's changing. Nothing's replacing it. So what was felt was we actually don't care about the loyalty anymore. And you and I both knew that had a pretty fast fallout from there. Not because of just the benefits, but it's interesting how those things kind of correlated.
It's true. And these benefits are things that people talk about when somebody says, oh, you work at X company. What's it like there? Some people are going to talk about, oh, this is what it's like. This is what the job is like. This is what my manager's like. This is what the environment's like. But they're also going to talk about how that makes their life better. Part of it could be how they're compensated. But a lot of it then becomes the benefits. In the era that we're living in, health insurance is so wonky and difficult to navigate in the United States. So people will say, how are the health insurance benefits? And I know people who have stayed in horrid jobs, toxic environments, but they'll do it because the health insurance is phenomenal. And they've got a child who's got special needs, or they have a condition, and the only way their family's going to get taken care of is if they hang in there long enough.
I'm doing that right now with my husband. He's going to stay in his military job for longer than he wants to because we have benefits.
Right.
And that is not a choice that he wants to make, but we need healthcare. Healthcare is expensive. So just a little personal antidote there. I mean, that's a real thing.
It is. And I don't believe that employers, when they're making these decisions, just do it willy-nilly and they do it to penalize anyone. But I also feel like, for as hard as the people in HR, people who are in the C-suite, and a lot of times there's somebody from HR in the C-suite, when they're trying to make this decision about what we should keep and what we shouldn't keep, they're not sitting there thinking about all the faces of people that they're going to need to tell this to. They're thinking about getting to a number. They're thinking about getting to a budget line. They're thinking about, oh, we do want to change our health benefits, but then we have to go to a different benefits provider. And that means that these things aren't offered and it's too expensive to offer things like the car perk or something like that. And they make that decision. And so that's made for, I think, sometimes the right reasons. It's because because the company is there to make money, but it's not often made for reasons that make sense to employees. And then over time, as you said, the trust gets eroded when you start kind of changing those things on people mid-stride, when they're used to, or they're kind of a culture to, this is what the benefit package actually looks like.
Or even so, just having a rhythm to it. So, for example, we evolve/update our benefits annually at this time. That makes sense. I expect changes to happen, right? That was, versus, oh, we're just going to make this change and then not make any other changes. Now, I think to compensate for any changes, or just to make sure that your employees feel like they are thought about as humans, you also have to I've seen this done really well.
Yeah.
Is you can give your leaders of teams, I'm talking at big organizations, or if you're a small business, you yourself at the top, can have that agency to, for example, give out a monthly gift card for performance, or say, oh, we're crushing it. You guys take off this Friday, or take a half day this Friday, or hey, and this happened at the same company. So there was also really good things happening, which is you've been really traveling a lot this month. Like, go take a spa day and we're going to pay for it. Like, that's unheard of. Like, but if employers started to do that and say, like, you're a human being, I see you really busting your ass, like, and I care about you. Or hey, this was another one too, which is, hey, you're recovering from the flu. Like, I'm going to send an IV to your house.
Yeah, I remember that. You always got to be.
These are crazy things, but I've seen them happen. And I think we can kind of take the stigma out of, like, oh, work and personal life. Like, we're humans. And I haven't met anyone that has said, like, oh, that's crossing the line.
No.
It's gratitude. It shows that, hey, I see you. I respect and recognize what you're doing. And I want you to know that, not just through my words, not just through compensation, but giving you a little bit of reprieve from what you're doing.
Okay. Do you have any examples? I do. Do you have any examples of things that are benefits? They're called benefits, but they don't really feel like a benefit when it's actually delivered.
Benefits that don't feel like benefits.
Okay, so I worked for a company.
Yeah,
Listen, I worked for a company, or with a company. This is when I was consulting with, that was really big into making sure that everybody wore branded material, like polo shirt, hats, whatever, jackets. They wanted all their employees to walk around town and wherever their location was and wear branded stuff, but they wouldn't give you. They made you buy everything, which is so common.
Mm-hmm.
But they made such a big deal about, like, we have this whole catalog and you can buy all this stuff and you can have a 10% discount. And they're asking you to buy, $100 jacket or like $80 polo shirts. And these were hourly employees. They're people who were making, at the time, it was like $22 an hour. And that was this was many years ago because I'm old. They were asking people who didn't have that kind of money to buy an $80 polo, and it was branded with the logo on it. And if you weren't wearing it, it was almost like the scene from Office Space where they're talking about where the Jennifer Aniston's character is getting dressed down because she's not wearing enough pieces of flair on her outfit. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, Whitney, you're not wearing a whatever branded polo. Like, you really should. You should go on the company website and buy that. So,
But spend your own money.
Spend your own money, and you get a discount, a 10% discount. I had another company that I did work for, and I had to manage this program, and it was for service. It was years of service. And so I thought, oh, is it going to be like an award ceremony, a plaque, or something? No. They gave you a catalog, which I know a lot of companies do this. I'm like looking at you, like, stop doing this. A catalog that would have gifts in there. So we would give gifts at 5 years, 10 years, 15, etc. And one of the gifts that almost everybody picked was this Smoky Joe charcoal grill. So think like something you take camping, right? You can cook like 4 or 5 burgers on it. And it was great for that. The retail price of this thing at Walmart at the time was like $16.99. And we were giving this, it was like, oh no. And we were paying the company, this benefits company, like $25 for every grill. So I'm like, okay, the math isn't mathing. I would rather spend my money and go buy this person the grill. And these folks were so appreciative that the company did anything for them. But what they really wanted was recognition that they had been there for 5 years. And they were so proud of that. But what the company pushed was, but you get a grill, or you got something like that. And I just always would think, this is not the purpose. We need to be honoring the fact that these folks are loyal. They work really hard. They show up. They give they were really, a lot of these people were giving 100% every single day. They don't want a freaking grill. Nobody wants a grill. They want a thank you, a genuine level of respect and appreciation. Like, so many companies still do that same thing. Pick a prize out of the catalog. I'm like, is this Chuck E. Cheese? Is this Chuck E. Cheese? Or are we honoring somebody's loyalty, tenure, and service?
Yeah, I've seen something similar at a company that I consulted for that wasn't a catalog, but it's what a lot of organizations do today, which is you add up points, and on a website you get to choose a prize, right? It's the digital catalog.
Are you trying to inspire me right now? Is this Chuck E. Cheese? It's the same thing, Whitney. That it's ludicrous.
It's ludicrous. Well, so this example was from someone when I was coaching. So this was a high-level executive. And at their, I forget if it was like 20, 25 year, but it was like a significant years of service. They got like a certain number of points, right, added. So you can get points for recognition, like people could give you points, or you got points for your years of service. So this person had gotten a years of service point deposit. And the point deposit, I'm going to make up numbers because I don't know what the translation was, but let's say it was 500 points, but it was equal to like $5. And this person she was talking to me and she was like, okay, I've been here for 20 years and I got $5 to pick whatever I wanted from this site. She was like, this is insulting.
Yeah.
And now this person also didn't want a parade, a show, anything like that. But it's almost like, don't give me anything because this is a slap in the face.
So both of my parents served in the federal government for 30 plus years, 40 plus years. A lot of people in my family have. And then, my ex-husband was in the military for 26 years. So I had the benefit of being able to see a lot of people in my life receive awards. This is something the federal government and the military do so well. Military, it's really obvious for most people. They understand you receive decorations and medals and other kinds of awards for your service and the things you accomplished. In the civil service, it was very similar too, that they would have like a pin. This is your 5-year pin, your 10-year pin. And you would see people walking around with it on their lapel every day. That was the thing that came on and off of their suit jacket. Because it meant so much to them. And you could walk around and see that and you go, oh, you've been here for 15 years. You've been here for 20 years. It was meaningful because there was ceremony usually. I'm not saying everybody had got that ubiquitous across the board, but there was ceremony. There was importance to it. It was sort of like sacred, if you will, and then there was an outward sign of understanding when you would interact with other people that you would know what that looked like to me. So like, could we take a page out of that playbook and make it a meaningful experience? So a benefit or a perk of working here is we're going to honor your service however long you're here, but when you're here for significant periods of time, we're going to say thank you.
Yes, and here I'm going to challenge you on this one a little bit.
God.
So I agree, and I think that's a little outdated in terms of, so the pins, sure, the catalog, sure, we agree on that.
Yeah.
And the loyalty, I think, is uber in the past, because not, and I'm not talking about because people are job jumping, because that happens. But at the same time, I think we should equally celebrate someone giving it their all for 5 years as we do for someone giving it 80% for 20.
True.
And so just because you're somewhere for 20, if it's an organization that holds a high level of performance-based standards, yeah, let's celebrate that. But that, you and I both know that that's super rare, right? So the person that's there for 20 years, most likely, now I'm not saying that they didn't put in their work, right? But they probably could have done that anywhere for 20 years, right? They're there for 20 years. Are they crushing it for 20 years? Like, what are we rewarding? Are we rewarding their accomplishments? Or are we rewarding the time that they've been there?
So I think I'm with you, and that was a very polite way of saying you're an old lady, Catie. You've been around a long time. I will tell you a story from very early in my career. The first couple of years of my professional life, I had the benefit of working at the Pentagon. I was serving as a contract employee, working with the United States Air Force, and we worked for, I say we because I think about this team all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We worked for a general, shout out to General Retired 4-star Kevin P. Chilton, astronaut, great American, great human being. I loved working for this guy, and he was a 2-star general when I worked with him, and really, for somebody who was 22, 23, 24 years old, in some ways had no business getting to be in some of the rooms I got to be in, but he knew that I had a passion for what I was doing, and so he rewarded that by letting me sit at the table and do a lot of hard work. When it was time for me to leave that office and I was moving to Colorado, he came to my going away ceremony. And it wasn't a ceremony because I was a contract employee, but he came because they were going to give me a plaque. We used to give everyone a clock, and we'd engrave like your name on it and stuff. I still have it. It's on my shelf in my office at home. And he would come and he would give you a coin and just say something nice, that sort of thing. So when he came in, I think a couple minutes beforehand, his aide or whoever was like, okay, one more time. Like, I know who Catie is because we did a lot of work together, but he came in to say goodbye to me. So he got prepped, okay? He comes in to say goodbye to me, shake my hand, whatever. And when he was doing it, he said, I only found out today that you're not a civil employee, that you're actually a contract employee. Because he said, I just wanted to let you know that you always acted like one of us. You always worked as hard as everybody else did. And it meant a lot to me that you were doing everything that everybody else alongside you was doing too. But you were, I was, as extra help, if you will, and that meant a ton to me. I have the clock. I have that coin that he gave me. Somebody wrote, but he signed a letter from him that I still have in my personal safe. And it meant so much to me that he came and said, thank you for the long days and nights and sometimes weekends and holidays and things that we did. That I was like, Whitney, I think I was 24 years old. That means as much to me at 45 as it did at 24. And that to me, like treating people, I wasn't there for 10 years. Right. I was there for 2.5 years, and he treated me as if I had been there for 20 years.
I think that's my point.
Yeah.
I think that is what, at the end of the day, as humans, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and want to be recognized in that way. That is someone that you don't know what you at the time probably didn't know how he saw you.
No.
Or if he even saw those hard nights and those long days, but he did, and that meant a lot. And I think that is really, yes, the extra perks are nice too, but hearing and seeing that matters. And so you asked about one more thing on this as we close this episode, is like, what's a perk that isn't really a perk? I think also related to this is when organizations have perks that are pseudo frowned upon if used. So, example, we have unlimited PTO, but don't use it. Don't actually use it, or we're not going to approve it. Um, what? Like, no, I'm not asking. I'm using it. I don't need to get it approved if it's unlimited PTO, right? Like that type of thing. Or, we might have the sabbatical, right? But wait, we have a sabbatical, but you're really going to take it? I mean, we consulted, not at the same time, but we consulted for a company, and I remember they had amazing parental leave.
Mm-hmm.
And this was for mothers and fathers.
Yep.
Men and women. And I remember there were a couple men at the same time, director levels, who were about to have first time dads. And they were both going to take the full parental leave, which at the time was 3 months for men, which again in the US was unheard of. At this company for women, it was 6 months. So it was very, very nice, very generous. And I remember them both saying, yeah, we're going to take it. And people within their peers at that leadership level were stunned that they were taking it. And there was this underlying tension of, I can't believe they're taking it. So I think that goes into the same bucket as perks that aren't perks, is if your culture doesn't allow you to live into the perks and actually take full advantage of the perks, and they're really not perks to begin with.
They're not. So, okay. So a little bit of guidance then. So for people who are leaders, managers, and they're the people who are kind of overseeing in some ways how their employees are taking advantage of the perks and benefits that are offered. You said something earlier that I think is important bringing up again, and it's come up in multiple coaching conversations this year, that just because you weren't offered a perk when you needed it does not mean you should poo-poo somebody using it. So parental leave is the easiest one I can think of when someone says like, well, I didn't get 3 weeks off when my child was born. It's like, yeah, that sucks. It should have happened. So you're going to pave the way for somebody else to do it. So do I wish that I didn't have to muddle through short-term disability and when everything was going to run out and what my salary was going to be, pulling out extra taxes because short-term disability wouldn't do that, to make sure I didn't get hosed on next year's tax return. Yeah, I shouldn't have had to do that when I was 2, 3, 4 weeks postpartum. It was unconscionable that in the United States that we do that, but that's what we do. And it still happens to this day to a lot of parents. So I'll be damned if I'm going to make it harder for anybody else just because it was hard for me. Mm-hmm. It was not fair when I had it happen to me 14 years ago and 11 years ago. I will not ever support making anybody feel uncomfortable about that. In fact, I'm going to be the champion in the opposite direction. So I think for leaders, they've got to have a really good sense of, what benefits are afforded to people, what perks are afforded to people, and understand how they're supposed to help exercise that within for the folks that work for them.
Yes. And creating that culture that celebrates you taking advantage of the perks that are offered.
That's right.
The benefits and the perks. So benefits, sure, health insurance, we don't need to celebrate you taking that. You're going to take that. But taking advantage of the things that are offered, that's a win. We want everyone to do that, and we're going to celebrate that.
For employees, I really think it's important for them to, as they're signing on to a new company, like you're signing out the paperwork and you're getting all these like glossy brochures, and you're like, yeah, I'll read that later. Yeah, read it right now. Like, do the work, read what you are afforded. Because if the company is saying that they're offering that to you, take it. Do not go, well, I'm not really sure if it's okay. Just take it. You're going to learn a lot about the company that you're working for if you try to exercise a benefit or a perk and it doesn't like feel right when you're doing it. It's probably because they're offering it and they really don't want you to take it, which is telling. Gives you some more data about this, if this is a company that you want to like sign on with for a very long time.
Yeah. So much with company benefits, but please share your perks that you have at your company. We'd love to hear some other ones that maybe we haven't heard of, and ones that maybe aren't working for you too. But that's what we got for today.
That's a wrap.
That's a lot to unpack. We'll see you next time.